everybody. Bobby Young with Green Outdoors is joining us, and he's going to share some tips and ideas to help us stay mentally and physically healthy during our stay-at-home time. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Deb. I hope everyone's doing well in this time, but we'll just go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to start with something that anyone can do, whether you live in an apartment or you rent or you have a business that doesn't really have any lawn or anything, and that is container gardens. We can all, you can't be too antsy right now with the freezes coming. I got a little antsy a couple weeks ago and have already lost some annuals, but if we wait a couple more days, I think next week we can really get going on container gardens. The simplest form that I want to share of container gardens, just to follow, is the thriller, filler, and spiller model, which I'm going to show a picture here. And so it's just a pretty simple form where you have a thriller or a tall plant, or it can even be a shorter flowering plant that really is the focal point of the container garden. And then you need something to fill around that focal point, which could also be flowers, or it could just be greenery. And then pots always look good with something spilling over like you see here. So this is just a pretty basic container garden, but this would grow in over the summer, and really by midsummer would give you a really nice container garden. And it's just a simple way to get a good container garden going. There are a couple of plants that I suggest for around here for container gardens. Let's see if I can move forward. Yeah, so one is coleus, which I love, and you can use these as the thriller, filler, or spiller. There's different heights on them. There's some that trail, so they make good spillers. And obviously, as you can see, you can get all sorts of different colors with the coleus. So it's a really good one for container gardens. Sweet potato vine is great for a trailer or a spiller. It'll really fill in over the year, and you got two different color options. Purple fountain grass is one of my favorite thrillers to use, just for that height when you need a lot of height, which looks good, especially if you have like one pot on each side of an entryway. The purple fountain grass will really help frame that entryway, and it makes it inviting. And then begonias is just a go-to for any filler, or you can use it as a thriller if you'd like. So that's kind of some basic tips to get a good container garden going. With the landscape, there's a lot of things we can be doing now to improve our landscape. Definitely weeds are going to start popping up here. They're a little slower this year. Usually by this time I'm pulling a lot of weeds out of gardens, but they're a little slower this year, but they're starting to pop up and they will take off. The nice thing about them being a little slower is you have time to still put a pre-emergent down if you'd like to, if that's something you're interested in. I know preen is a household one that works pretty well. The only thing that I've ever found with preen that is something to worry about is it can damage daylilies if you get it into the crown just right. So if you have a big daylily area, it'd be a good idea to skip the preen in that area. It's also a good time to trim a lot of the hedge shrubs, the boxwoods and the yews and all that. They'll be growing quick now, but if you trim them often this time of year, usually you can get them to fill into the shape that you want more than trying to grow legs everywhere like they tend to do during the spring. And just some tips for trimming shrubs, depending on the shrub, timing is important. So boxwoods and yews, you can pretty much trim any time of year. But for flowering shrubs, it's all about the timing. And a good rule of thumb is just to trim them right after they flower. So if they flower in the spring, that means that they usually flower on old wood, which means that it's the last year's growth of wood is where the flower buds are located. So if you trim those off over the winter, then there's a good chance you won't have any flowers the next year. But if they flower in the summer, then it could be on old wood or new wood. So it's just a risky game to trim summer flowering plants right now. And then in the fall, they almost always trim on all the new growth. So you won't want to trim that off until after they flower. I know I'm going to plug my alma mater here a little bit, K-State. The K-State Extension, Johnson County Resources, like their website, they have so much good information on when to trim shrubs, and I'll show you right here. Let's see, yeah, so this is just one of the resources they have on there, and for our area, they literally have a lot of the common shrubs we see, and then X is where you shouldn't trim, and stars where you can trim them and you're safe to trim, keep them flowering. So the resources they have on their website are awesome and definitely help answer a lot of questions. It's also a good time to trim smaller landscape trees or really any tree around the house. There's a couple important things to remember when trimming trees. The smaller, lower branches, especially on young trees, you want to, if you don't want a branch to grow out there permanently, then it's a good time to trim them when they're young. Also, it's a good time for younger trees to look for if they have a dominant leader or not. So a dominant leader, you want, most trees structurally, you want them to have one solid trunk going all the way up. You don't want competing trunks leading the way. So on young trees, it's a really good idea to prune off dominant leaders. So the tree on the left here, you see, it's too late to trim off one of those 2 leaders, and this crotch area here is a very weak point. A lot of times when you see trees split during storms, it'll be in these areas and one of the leaders will go, and then that tree is never going to have the same shape again. So it's a good idea to check if you have young trees and see if you have something growing like this, and just to go ahead and choose the strongest one and leave it and prune off the weaker one, and that'll help your tree shape for later as it grows. Now that's not true of all trees. There are some trees that just grow with multiple leaders and trunks. So it just depends on the type of tree. Proper pruning is also really important with trees. A lot of people like to do flush cuts, and so what that does is actually take the response chemicals away from that branch so that the wound wood can't form. So what we want to do when pruning trees is to leave this branch collar for sure, because that is where all the response chemicals are for wound wood, and wound wood just protects the tree from infection. The same way like we get cuts and we worry more about infection than the actual cut itself. When you prune trees, it leaves it very vulnerable to pests and infections. So, but if you leave the branch collar, then it'll respond quicker and get wound wood growing around it, which will protect it. For larger branches, it's really important to start with a cut at the bottom of the branch, as you can see on the graphic to the right there. And what that first cut does is protect it when you do cut that branch down, is protect the bark from peeling when it falls, because when you cut from the top, obviously the weight of the branch will pull it down before the cut will go all the way through. So if you can start with a small just cut on the bottom of the tree, it will protect from the bark peeling all the way back. And then you cut on the outside of that first cut, and then you come back in close to the tree, leaving that branch bark collar. And that will help the tree recover from pruning. So it's also a good time to plant perennial herbaceous plants. In my opinion and in my experience, trees and shrubs are better to be planted in the fall. They just tend to survive better. But with perennial plants, herbaceous perennial plants that are subject to freezing temperatures, killing them off over the winter, it's good to get them in the ground now, let them get 9 months of root growth in before the winter comes so they can survive the winter. Yeah, so the best rule of thumb I have here is that the best time to plant anything is directly after the season that is most likely to kill it. So trees, summertime, the summer heat and drought is most likely to take trees out. So it's good to plant those in the fall, so they have the fall to grow roots and then the full spring to really get good root growth in before the summer heat comes. It's also obviously a great time for mulch, and so mulching obviously makes your landscape look a lot better. A lot of people do it just for the aesthetics, but it also helps regulate the soil temperature a lot, which can protect your perennial plants when they're popping back up from those late frosts like we're experiencing this week. It's good to get mulch down before those frosts so the soil temperature stays relatively equal so that you don't have those late freezes coming in and killing off plants. We'll move on to the lawn now. This time of year, obviously, the grass should be growing great. If it's not in your yard, then there might be something else going on. We had a wet winter. It was pretty mild. Things greened up pretty quick, and lawns are really doing well. Right now, the most important thing you can do for the lawn is just the cultural care, which would mostly be mowing it frequently. You don't want the grass to get too tall in between mows, and it's not just aesthetics. Obviously, you don't want the clumps on top of the yard if you don't bag or any of that, but it's also just there's a rule called the rule of 1/3, which is you don't want to cut off more than 1/3 of a grass plant at any one time. So if you're letting your lawn go over a week, especially at this point, and it's getting up to 5 inches, then this week you can really only cut it down to 3.5, and then by the time you get back to it the next time, it could be 5.5 inches, and you got to go up even higher. So it's important to really mow your lawn frequently and never take off more than 1/3. Of course, after a lot of people in early spring will cut their lawn really short just to get rid of some of the thatch and open up for new growth, but it's a little late to do that now. We might see some damage later in the summer if you do that now. So if you didn't do that this spring, there's always next spring. So, but probably not a good time to do that now. And obviously keeping your blades sharp is important now if you do mow your own lawn. It's more important in the summer because what dull blades do is they actually fray the tips of grass blades, which leaves more surface area for water to escape. So in the summer, if you're mowing with dull blades, the surface area where grass escapes is always just right at the top. But with dull blades, it's frayed. And so you have a lot more surface area where water's escaping. And obviously, you need all the water you can get in the summertime in Kansas and Missouri. Fertilizing right now it's important, but it's not as important as the fall. So the grass right now is focusing on shoot growth, which is the upward growth, obviously. As you can see, if you look outside, probably all your neighbors' lawns are long. But in the fall, the grass focuses more on root growth, and that is where you want to fertilize more, obviously, so to assist in that root growth, because that'll give you a healthier lawn moving forward, and it'll even make your lawn green up quicker in the spring next year. So fertilizing now, especially with nitrogen, you want to use low amounts and keep the higher amounts for the fall time. Our last lawn application in our program is late November, December, and that's a heavy nitrogen we call winterizer. And that is really when the grass is pushing root growth. So that will help your lawn be stronger for years to come. An iron application right now can help deepen that green color of grass. That is something that we often do. It's probably too late for crabgrass preventer this year if you haven't gotten it down. Usually the rule is before the red buds pop out and the forsythia blooms. So we're past both of those. I'm sure everyone's seen the red buds around. They look really good this year. So, and just a side note on that, dandelions are actually perennial weeds. So the crabgrass preventer, what it is made to do is stop seeds from germinating. So it won't do anything for dandelions because dandelions pop up from the roots every year. That's why you often see them in the same location, where crabgrass pops up from seed every year. So that's why there's the crabgrass preventer that works as long as you get it down before the seed germinates, and then dandelions won't be affected by that. If you're interested in aerating your lawn this spring, that's just fine if it's in a heavily shaded area, especially, or heavily trafficked. Really, you can aerate any time of year. It's best to do it when the lawn's healthy and growing well so that it can recover from the aeration fine. Seeding in the spring is always tough because of that summer. It's kind of the same as planting other plants, in that the summer is more likely to kill the fescue and Kentucky bluegrass in Kansas than the winter is. So planting it in the fall is better because you get 2 seasons of root growth before that summer comes and wipes it out. But you can plant, especially in shaded areas, you can seed in the spring. The key to seeding is just to get good seed to soil contact. So really roughing up the soil. So the seed will just dry out on top of soil if the soil is dry and hard. So really beating up the soil and letting the soil kind of make a soft bed for the seed helps a lot. Irrigation and watering is also obviously something that's popular right now. Really, this time of year, you don't need to be watering your lawn. Mother Nature will take care of it for the most part. So a well-established lawn this time of year, there's really no reason to be watering it. That's especially the case for cool season grasses, which is most of what we see around here, fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. Zoysia being a warm season grass definitely doesn't need water this time of year. It's still probably dormant, maybe just breaking dormancy. So, but if you did seed last fall, it wouldn't be a bad idea to make sure, if we go 5 or 7 days without a rainstorm, it'd be a good idea to maybe give it a little bit of water. But usually if it's raining every 3 or 4 days, like we see in the spring around here, you'll be just fine. Overwatering grass, especially this time of year, can have the same effect of the heavy nitrogen fertilizer and this time of year, in that the plant will use all that water to grow up, and it's not focusing on root growth at all right now. So it's not going to help your lawn become stronger. It's just going to make you have to mow more often. So a less frequent, heavier watering is always the best way to go. Even in the summer, it's the best. Fescue can survive 6 to 8 weeks in dormancy during the heat of the summer, so it's not a bad thing to see it brown out a little bit in the summer. And then that can promote root growth following that once it breaks dormancy in the fall. And heavy watering with our clay soils that we see around here can cause problems. I know a lot of newer irrigation controllers have what they call cycles. And so when you turn on your irrigation system, if it's set to run for 10 minutes, instead of running each zone for 10 minutes, it'll run each one for 5 minutes and then follow it up immediately again for 5 more minutes, just running it twice in a row at half the time so that the water has time to saturate in the soil, because there's no point in watering the pavement and having it all run off. So another thing that I know people could be doing, that a lot of people like to do, is burying gutter downspouts. And there's some things that I see a lot. This isn't necessarily that important, but I see mistakes made with this a lot that I kind of just wanted to highlight if you are deciding to bury your downspouts while you're quarantined at home. So it's important to what we don't want to do is just have pipe go directly into the gutter downspout and then underground and then out to a pop-up emitter, because if you have any leaves at all over time, the debris is going to build up, especially right where the elbow is underground, and you're not going to be able to clean it out. So what we always do is install them with a little Y right off of the downspout so that you have access to that elbow and you can clean it out over the years as it's getting clogged up. Another thing that's important is to make sure that that elbow that is underground is well secured and you even probably want to excavate a little extra soil down there and fill it back in with gravel and really tamp it down and set that elbow on that, because I see this all the time. And then, I mean, a splash guard is much better than seeing this. This is just shooting water right down into the foundation of your house. So, and then with the pop-up emitter, outside or in the lawn, you want to make sure that it's surrounded by gravel so that it doesn't clog up either, because pop-up emitters have the little hole at the bottom where water is supposed to slowly drain out after the rainstorm, so you don't have water above ground. It can push it down, but that clogs up pretty easy too with our clay soil. So really surrounding it in gravel is a really good idea. That is all the information that I have. I was hoping it wouldn't rain, and it's not raining. So I'm actually at a house where we have a robotic mower installed, and I was thinking it'd be cool to show you guys that, because there's a lot of benefits to robotic mowers. One, they're battery powered, so that's obviously cleaner for the environment, and it's much quieter than your conventional mowers. There's a lot less compaction compared to even push mowers or commercial mowers. It cuts the lawn every day, so you never break that rule of a third that I talked about earlier with the grass. It's just cutting millimeters off every day, which also helps fertilize the lawn, because those grass blades are falling directly to the soil, decomposing, and the grass can then reuse those the nitrogen and all the other elements. There's also never any clumps on top of the lawn, and we have seen robotic mowers scare away squirrels for a little bit. They usually end up getting used to it and coming back, but we've seen them scare away squirrels, so that's another benefit. There are no rain delays with robotic mowers. You never have to try to beat the rain or wait until it dries out. They don't take lunch breaks, which is mostly a benefit for me, but they don't take up any space in the garage. They live outside. They dock themselves in their base station, and they leave a carpet-like finish. So we think of mowing now a lot with stripes. Everyone wants the best stripes, but it's really cool to see a lawn that you can't see anything, and it's just always well maintained, and there's no stripes at all. It just looks like a carpet. So we can start a Q&A, or I can take the computer to find the robotic mower wherever it is on the lawn, or whatever's best here. So we can do that. I had it up front earlier, but it has a mind of its own sometimes. Yeah, the rain's holding off for now, so that's a good sign. Oh, it did. It had to go home for a charge, I guess, so it went and docked itself.
So Bobby?
Yes.
So as you're walking, is the robotic mower something that just stays at the person's home then?
Yes, so they're available for sale for anyone. We use Husqvarna. We found that they're the best brand. But
Okay.
for our customers that use it, we have 11 customers right now that are using them. So there's just one mower per yard for them, and so they stay there, and it sends us notifications if anything goes wrong, like if it gets stuck in the lawn or if someone picks it up or anything like that. We get a note on our phone immediately, so we're out there to fix it so the customer doesn't have to worry about a thing.
Show us the docking station again. I've seen the electric mower. I haven't seen the docking station.
Yep, so there's where it parks back here. We usually kind of put it halfway in the landscape bed and halfway on the lawn, just to kind of get it out of the way a little bit more. But we almost always just install them right by air conditioning units or other places in the lawn where they can kind of hide.
It's still pretty cool.
How long has that technology been around, Bobby?
So it's actually been in Europe for over 20 years. Husqvarna's been making them over there. RoboMo is a brand that's been over there for about 20 years. But it's only really been used in the US for 2 or 3 years. There's a couple of other companies out there. There was a franchise that was started in Texas, but they just stopped, and they're doing more consulting with robotic mowers now.
Are you the only company in Kansas City that offers this?
I've seen other companies mention it on their website, but I've never seen or heard of another company actually having one out. So I can't say for sure, but I haven't seen it. So now it's leaving. Sometimes when you watch them for a little too long, they can look pretty dumb, but so
They
since
get close
what's that?
Do they get close enough that you don't have to edge, or is that still another duty that needs to be done?
It depends on the barrier. So for a barrier like this, which is just plastic edging, it can get all the way up there and really cut it down. But barriers like hard walls and especially streets, we don't put them too close, so there will be a little bit of trimming there. But we also offer that in one of the packages. We come by and trim once a week still. So
Very good.
yeah.
So do we have any questions?
I had one.
Please.
Oh, Bobby, this is Linda.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good. I love playing in my yard. I love having dirty fingernails. That's why I don't have nails. I planted 3 butterfly bushes last year, a large one and 2 small ones.
Okay.
2 small ones have little tiny bit of growth coming back. The large one looks like a large dead tree. How do butterfly bushes grow? Do they grow off of new or old growth?
Butterfly bushes can do either. They're more of a southern plant. They really need full sun around here. Do they get full sun?
Yep.
So they'll be a little bit behind the rest of the plants, but you'll probably start seeing them leaf out along the old branches too, and have some new growth coming up from the ground. So
yeah, because everything I'm reading is like one cut them back, the other one don't cut them back. I mean, it's so one just looks like a giant dead bush in the backyard.
Yeah, I would say if you just planted them last year, don't cut them back yet.
Okay.
I would let them. They're still acclimating to the new environment and transplant stress. So I would let them go this year. I know they will be a little bit behind other shrubs, so I wouldn't be worried about it too much right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions?
I have one, Bobby.
Yeah.
So you mentioned zoysia grass, fescue, Kentucky blue. What do you think is the ideal grass blend for Kansas?
It really depends on your wants and needs. So fescue is probably the grass I would suggest most often, but there's really not a lot of grasses that can handle dense shade. So in dense shade, it's kind of tough. What I do in dense shade is I usually plant a perennial ryegrass and fescue mix. The perennial ryegrass probably won't survive the following winter, but it'll protect the fescue a little bit and give it a better chance of popping up and taking off. Zoysia is a warm season grass, so it is actually only green for about 4 or 5 months this time of year, but is very low maintenance. We're switching one of our customers over to a zoysia backyard once the time gets there, which is about mid-May when we want to plant the zoysia. And they want it in their backyard because they have dogs and kids that are just tearing up their lawn no matter how much they do. And so they're doing zoysia just to have a decent lawn for the summer months and not have all the damage from the kids and dogs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions for Bobby? Well, If not, I want to say our sincerest thank you. I do think it's a great time to get outside and get some fresh air and a good perspective to keep us all healthy during this time. And nature is definitely the best way to be able to do that. Bobby,
Yes.
you're awesome chamber member. We thank you so much for joining us today and for being such a good member of the chamber. If we can help you in any way, and it's good to hear that you're doing so well, keep up the good work.
Okay, will do. Thank you very much for having me.
Great job, Bobby.
Thank you.
Thank you.